Yesterday, I also got a email, a number of emails yesterday actually, from Jordan Williams, our next guest, from the Taxpayers Union, who got stuck into, as you would expect, the Taxpayers Union would, after all, sort of meat and drink, really, into the Whānau Ora Commissioning Agency and their commissioning of the advertisement that you would have read about and probably got pretty upset about just quietly last week, which is a overt attempt to gerrymander the MMP process by creating an extra Maori seat. And that public education, so-called public education campaign, it's not education, it's a propaganda campaign, shameless electioneering, it has to be said, as the Taxpayers Union say, was funded completely by the Whānau Ora Commissioning Agency. Now, the Whānau Ora Commissioning Agency isn't actually a government department, although I think a lot of people have that view, or it's sort of like, it's in actual fact a private company, as I understand, pretty much run by John Tamahiri and his mates in Te Pāti Māori. But wholly reliant, as I can recall, and the last time I had a look at their annual financial accounts, wholly reliant upon the New Zealand taxpayer and government. Well, that obviously elicited outrage. There is some form of inquiry or investigation or review underway within Te Puni Koukuri and by the government, but you'd have to say it's pretty mild and meek by comparison. The Taxpayers Union not going away on this issue, though, and they say, listen, this has the potential not simply to be bite you in the bum with Whānau Ora, but a whole series of other ilk organisations in this country, and they won't change. To talk about this, we're joined by Taxpayer Union Soprano, Jordan Williams, Executive Director, joins us now. Jordan, great to have you back on the show. Nice to talk to you, mate.
Good morning, Michael.
All right, I think I've summed that up. The 30-minute advertisement, it's got your goat up. Now, here's the question. You've got a cunning plan, so cunning you could put a tail on it and call it a rat. What is it?
Well, let's first start with what the issue is, because it's not just whānau ora. It is that more and more of what has traditionally been done by government or the community sector have sort of merged together. You know, in your era when you were in Parliament, of course, Geoffrey Palmer had the great Wango Hunt,
Mm,
which are these quasi-governmental bodies that sort of with less or independence and less ministerial oversight. Well, it sort of got worse than that because you have non-profits, these incorporated societies or charities or companies incorporated with not-for-profit purposes that are almost entirely funded by taxpayers, but are private and unaccountable to taxpayers. So let's look at the Whānau Ora Commissioning Agency. You know, one of its supposed features is that this is, you know, by Māori, for Māori, it's independent, it's avoids political interference and all this stuff, which of course put aside the irony with John
mm,
Tamahiri
mm.
being the CEO. But ultimately, these are, in effect, government agencies. You know, I looked up the books of the Whānau Ora Commissioning Agency yesterday, some 133, I think, million or
That's right. Yep.
119 million is all government contracts. Okay.
Yep.
And, you know, the government asks, come along, we want you to do this. And just a measly 1%, i.e., interest, is anything other than accountable to the government. So the idea that, oh, well, we're a private organisation, that might be true legally, but in practice, this is all taxpayer money. And there's lots of them. I mean, this first came about, and when I originally had this idea that I'll get onto, was more than a decade ago when Heke Parata was pulling her hair out about the Kahanga Reo National Trust for putting wedding dresses and getting cash out and fuel um, uh, in vehicles from the Kahanga Ora National Trust's credit card. And she was rightly asking officials the questions, and they were saying, "Go away! You're not entitled to this. We're a private organisation." And there's one where realistically, the government can't say, "Well, we're going to take the contract off you," because you know what, you're going to shut down all the Kahanga Reo schools. It, it's sort of the worst of all worlds. So here's our solution: is that if you are a not-for-profit and you're more than saying reasonable minds can differ on what the percentage is. I put out there 75%. I've had a lot of emails back saying it should be lower. Then you should be accountable as if you basically were a quango. The Official Information Act should apply to you, and the duty of political neutrality or a prohibition on lobbying should apply to you. These are basic obligations that apply to taxpayer funded agencies. They should equally apply to these taxpayer funded not for profits slash government charities that are independently run but lack that accountability. And we went out yesterday in the email you're referring to and said, look, we've had this idea, and it's been sitting on the things I'd love to do list for, as I say, more than a decade. Here's the opportunity. Here's the real illustration of the problem. I've got a MP who's expressed an interest and said, yeah, I'll put this in the ballot. This looks pretty good. All right, let's get that bill drafted. Let's get the public opinion behind this. And a little bit like what we did with rates capping, that campaign only launched 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it's now pretty mainstream, and the government's picked it up and the PM's picked it up. We need them to do that with this. We've got to get that bill ready to go straight into the ballot.
Right. So you're running a campaign at the moment essentially to get a lawyer to draft the bill so that some smart MP will pick it up and run with it in Parliament under Private Members Day.
That's right. And
Yeah.
because it's not fiscal, it doesn't have any fiscal implications on the Crown, the government can't veto it. So if I only need to get I really want to focus on, the Greens often talk about transparency. And we've worked back when in the key era, when Parliament was slightly less polarised, the politics was less polarised. I really want to get the left on board on this too, because unless you've got something to hide, if you run a not-for-profit, why would you be against just the transparency that we expect from government agencies? I mean, from a principled taxpayers union, taxpayer position, we say if it's taxpayer money, then the taxpayer has the right to know where that's going. Because you look at these organisations, and unfortunately, a lot of them just say, no, we're private. When the media ask them questions, they just don't pick up the phone.
One of them would be Fish and Game, wouldn't it? I was just thinking, who derive almost
So
all
they
of
are
their
covered.
revenue.
So they're a quango.
Yeah,
Fish and Game are in particular. I have to buy fishing licenses, and it really annoys me that they use my money to lobby for things that I do not
correct.
believe in. I
Yeah,
think it's
yeah,
outrageous that because
yeah,
they have a right to tax, they've got a monopoly, except in
yeah.
Taupo, have an ability to tax me to go fishing, and they go and piddle that money away at lobbying, which really hacks me off. I don't mind breeding fish, I want that, but that's the service, that's what you pay for. But it's this sort of it's a much bigger problem. They at least though have the transparency of the OIA, of Fish Information Laws. Groups like John Tamahiru's outfit don't, despite being 99% funded by taxpayers. That's what we want to change.
Listen, as long as I've been in politics, and this is prior to being a member of Parliament, this goes back to the 1980s when I first got elected as a researcher. Selected as a researcher for the National Party. 1985 goes back to then. God, is it that long? I have watched the slush funds of central government go into Maori agencies, and there's always been, and National Party was part of it as well, a belief that, oh, well, it's sort of like, I don't know. There's never been a doctrine of accountability, particularly with Maori organisations, because there's been an almost unwritten contract, if you like, a social relationship, I guess, which is saying, listen, we'll give you some money and then you can go off and do with it what you will. Is Whānau Ora just a part of that long continuation of ideology, is it? Of thinking like that?